Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Welcome to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I am back with another feel-good episode for you to help live your life to the happiest and the fullest. Today, I thought we'd talk a little bit about personalities. And there's so many different types of personalities. I could go on about this forever. There's so many different things we could talk about. But today I thought we'd talk about introverts and extroverts and the difference between them. I know it's a very common thing. People will try to, that's a way that people describe each other, right? That personality. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? And the way that you kind of might describe yourself, or the way you kind of explain why you do the things you do, I guess, right? But I just think it's really important to actually understand what introverts and extroverts are, because it's really, a lot of people just assume like shy and outgoing, but there's so much more to it. And I think it's super important to be aware of different personality traits and understanding your own personality. And if you are an introvert or an extrovert, or where most of us lie somewhere in the middle, which I'll get into that. But the thing is like understanding your personality traits and understanding other people's personalities is so important, just to be able to communicate with people properly, to understand them, to build those strong relationships and those connections. And we all know how important it is to have those strong connections and relationships in our lives. So understanding personality is super, super important. So I have a lot to share with you today. I'm going to be going over exactly what an introvert and an extrovert is, what that all means. I'm going to go way back in time and talk about kind of where it all started. I have some studies and some psychologists to share with you today. And then I'm going to go into exactly what an introvert and an extrovert is, give you some examples and different things like that, some more research, and I will also talk about how to care for introverts and extroverts as well. So that way, if you have a family member or a friend or just anybody that you run into and you really recognize that they're an introvert or an extrovert, there's just ways that you can care for them, because they are two different types of personalities that need to be treated differently, because that's just the way that they work. So why don't we just jump right into it? Now, usually people think that extroverts are just the outgoing and introverts are super shy. Well, that's not just it, and it's not exactly what it means. So trying to understand these personality types and which one you are can help you manage a vast range of different experiences, not only for yourself, but for others, like I said. So where did this all begin? Well, the terms introvert and extrovert, they were popularized by Carl Jung in the early 20th century. And their meanings actually got confused between then and now, and we started thinking that everyone belongs either to extrovert or introvert, so one extreme or the other. But actually, Carl's point was that these are the very, very extremes of the scale, which means that most of us will just fall somewhere in the middle. So there is that spectrum of introvert versus extrovert, and you might have qualities of both, or you might just kind of fall somewhere in the middle, but maybe closer to introvert or closer to extrovert. So it's just nice to understand each extreme, so you can kind of figure out where you lie in the middle, and you can help read other people to see where they lie in the middle maybe. So if we looked at how most of us operated, we would never really be either on one spectrum or the other, because, we're always changing. First of all, our personality traits can change constantly, all the time, right? We're never really the same. And in different situations, you might be more of an introvert versus an extrovert, or the other way around, right? We're constantly changing, and the way that we act and our behavior changes depending on the situation we're in, or how we're getting treated, or how we're treating others, right? And so you're never really going to be one extreme or the other. You're usually going to fall somewhere in the middle, but you can go to both sides too, right? It's not really just one or the other. So that's really important to know, because you can't just say, oh, I'm an introvert, diehard extreme introvert, or a diehard extreme extrovert, and you just kind of close off to everything else. No, it's not really how it works. We're always changing. We always got different personality traits coming up for different reasons. So in the 60s, the psychologist Hans Eisnick, he said that the difference between introverts and extroverts were just simply that they had different levels of arousal. So meaning that the extent to which our minds and bodies are alert and responsive to stimulation. So his theory was that extroverts have a lower basic rate of arousal. So this means that extroverts need to work harder to arouse their minds and bodies to the same kind of normal state that introverts might reach quite easily. So this leads that extroverts or extroverted people might not be quite on the extreme of the scale, but they seek that novelty and that adventure and to crave the company of others because they need that more arousal. So for introverts, though, this kind of stimulation can be really overwhelming. So since their rate of arousal is much higher, they are stimulated easier. So time alone, one-on-one conversations, predictable situations are a lot more pleasant for introverts who are more sensitive to external stimulation. So there's kind of those two theories for you, and they kind of all combine to what we believe today. So it's just really important to understand these because, you know, this can play a role in what career you want to go to, the relationships that you're going to have, right? Like who you're compatible with, right? Like if you have really one extreme to the next, maybe you guys aren't compatible. Or maybe maybe you are. Maybe opposites are attracting and it works perfectly well because you help even each other out. Who knows? Or your friendships too, right? Maybe you're friends with more extroverts than introverts, or maybe the other way around. And knowing your personality traits, whether you're closer to an introvert or an extrovert extreme, that can also help with your triggers. If you are somebody that struggles with anxiety or any other mental illness, or just anything in general that makes you feel off edge sometimes, understanding your personality traits, and if you're more an introvert versus an extrovert, can really help you understand your triggers. And understanding your triggers for things like anxiety and mental illnesses are so important for your overall health and your well-being, because the more you understand your triggers, the better you can help yourself, and you can stay on a good level, and you can not be off edge, right? You can really just help be in a calm state most of the time when you understand more of your triggers, because you can avoid those things, right? So just understanding yourself and the way you do things and why you do what you do can be really, really helpful when it comes to those triggers and figuring out the things that you do. Have you ever said something, or we're talking to a friend, or you did something and you're like, why did I even do that? You think back in it and you're like, what? What was I thinking? What was going through my head there? Why were my actions like that? Or maybe you have a series of actions and then you kind of start thinking, you're like, wait, why am I doing that? You know, it's really important to understand who you are. And that's why I talk so much about self-reflection and journaling and writing things down and understanding your feelings and letting yourself feel the way that you do, because it is so important to understand yourself. The better that you know yourself, then the more that you can trust yourself. And then that means the more you can just rely on yourself. And your happiness comes from within. So if you want to live your life to the fullest and the happiest, you got to find that happiness within you and not in an external factor, even if you are an extrovert versus an introvert. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on in the episode here, but it's just important to understand yourself and learn your triggers and learn why you do the things that you do, and understand so that you can trust yourself and you can build that strong relationship not only with others, but with yourself. And when you truly understand yourself too, you're going to attract those like people, right? You give off an energy and you're going to receive that energy as well. So the better that you trust yourself, the better that you know yourself, you're going to attract those similar people, and it's just going to be a better overall situation for your life, just in general. So understanding your personality traits, understanding other personality traits are so, so important. So there was a little bit of history from where exactly introverts and extroverts came from. I do have some research and more studies and stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you later on in the episode, and we're going to dive way deeper into exactly what introverts and extroverts are, talk about body language, and then of course we're going to go into exactly how to care for introverts and extroverts. But right now it is time for a little bit of a break, so don't go anywhere. When we get back, I got lots more to share with you, and I'm super excited to do so stay tuned. I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo, just in case you forgot my name for some reason. But I am back sharing more information with you. Today we're talking about personality traits and personality types. In particular, we're talking about introverts versus extroverts. And it's not just shy, first outgoing. There's so much more that goes into being an introvert or an extrovert, or where exactly you lie on that spectrum. And I want to just touch, it's so important to know and understand yourself and these personality traits so that you can help better yourself and get to know yourself better and understand, different career paths and relationships and friendships and your triggers, and just trusting yourself so that you can give off the right energy and attract the right energy and the right people for your life. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into exactly what introverts versus extroverts are. So what factors play into each one? So it all kind of relates to where we get our energy from. So introverts, they tend to recharge by spending time alone. So they usually actually lose energy from being around people for long periods of time, particularly like really large crowds. So if you're more of an introvert on the spectrum, you might just really enjoy your time alone. You might feel more energized when you're alone. When you're with big crowds or large groups of people, you might just feel a little bit more drained. It's just too overwhelming for you. It's a lot going on, but you find when you're by yourself, you can really recharge. You can feel more yourself. You feel more relaxed, more energized though at the same time, and just an all over better feeling. Whereas extroverts get their energy from other people, from external factors, right? So extroverts actually find their energy, is really kind of drained from them when they're alone. They don't like being alone. Extroverts are very social people, right? So they really get their energy from being around those large crowds, from interacting with people, socializing, talking to others. And they find that when they have time alone, they just don't really like it. They feel drained. They feel tired maybe. Just their energy is not the same as they are when they're with different crowds. So they're usually out socializing more than introverts, right? So that's pretty much the basic. I'm sure you guys have heard about that. So introverts recharge from being alone, whereas extroverts recharge from being social. Now, think of it this way. When you're trying to figure out if somebody is an introvert or an extrovert, you can also think of their body language. So the way that an introvert acts around large crowds and stuff like that, right? They might feel closed off. They might close their arms, cross their legs, can maybe stand back a little bit, try to distance themselves from everybody, that kind of body language. Whereas an extrovert is going to be very outgoing, very socializing, so maybe hugging people and running up to people and talking to people and being right in the middle of everything, right? So that's kind of what an introvert versus an extrovert does for their body language. And it's funny because exercising makes you happier in general. I've talked about this lots on this podcast, how exercise is so good for you, for your mental health and your overall well-being. But the weird thing is that for an introvert, doing like a group sport actually doesn't really lead to happiness. It can actually cause them more stress or anxiety or drain them from energy. Whereas if an extrovert was doing exercise with a team sport or even just exercise in general, they're going to gain more energy from that. So it's kind of funny how that works. So if you are more of an introvert and you find yourself, doing team sports and you're maybe not enjoying it as much, that might be why, because that exercise is actually not making you happier. It's actually causing you more stress or more anxiety or just draining you a little bit. But extroverts, those are the ones that are on the team. They're the team players. They want to be around people. They like that team atmosphere. So getting that exercise in general, whether it's with a team or with not a team, they really gain their energy from that. And research has actually found that there's a difference in the brains of extroverted and introverted people. And this is in terms of how that they process rewards and how our genetic makeup differs. So pretty crazy. So for extroverts, their brain responds more strongly when a gamble pays off. So part of this is simply genetic, but it's also partly because of the difference in their dopamine systems as well, which is pretty crazy. So I want to explain to you an experiment that has happened. So there was an experiment that had people take gambles while in a brain scanner, and these were the results. So when the gambles they took paid off, the more extroverted group showed a stronger response in two crucial brain regions, so the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens. I'm probably not saying that right. But the nucleus accumbens is part of the dopamine system, which affects how we learn. And it's generally known for motivating us to search for rewards. So the difference in the dopamine system in the extrovert's brain tends to push them towards seeking out novelty, taking those risks, and enjoying unfamiliar or surprising situations more than others. And then the amygdala is responsible for processing emotional stimuli, which gives extroverts that rush of excitement when they try something highly stimulating that might overwhelm an introvert. So extroverts are more, I talk a lot about going out of your comfort zone because that's where you're going to learn and that's where you're going to grow. And extroverts are a lot more common to push themselves out of their comfort zone and to go do things that are more exciting. So if you're more of an introvert on the introvert spectrum, you might even have a harder time going out of your comfort zone because that is just so uncomfortable to you. Whereas an extrovert, it's still uncomfortable, but their comfort zone is quite different than an introvert's comfort zone. So an extrovert will push outside, like an extrovert's comfort zone is a larger than an introvert's comfort zone, and they are more willing to push even outside that further. Whereas an introvert, it might be a lot harder to be able to do that, and if you're an introvert or on the introvert spectrum side, you might really, really have to push yourself to get outside of your comfort zone. But like I said at the beginning of today's episode, our personality traits are always changing. Like we are always changing in general as people. Like you might be kind of more of an introvert, more of an extrovert, just in general, right? Kind of just as a sum up. But throughout your life, things can change. And maybe you grew up as more of an introvert, but you kind of grew out of that. Now you're an extrovert and you crave that, that social interaction and going outside of your comfort zone and figuring out all these different ideas, right? So there actually has also been more research that has shown the difference comes from how introverts and extroverts process stimuli. So the stimulation coming into our brains is processed differently depending on our personality. So for extroverts, the pathway is a lot shorter. So it runs through an area where taste, touch, and visual and auditorial sensory processing takes place. And then for introverts, stimuli run through a long, complicated pathway in areas of the brain associated with remembering, planning, and solving problems. So the thing is, introverts too, they're a lot more emotional. Or they can be a lot more emotional. They have a lot more kind of just going on, and they deal with those things alone. Whereas extroverts, maybe they're not as emotional. Like I said too, it doesn't, like, I'm not saying an extrovert can't be super emotional, but it does go usually that the introverts are a little bit more emotional. They got a little bit more extreme emotions than extroverts do. So that could also be a factor that you might want to weigh in if you're trying to, figure out kind of which area of the spectrum you exactly lie in. So it can go both ways. So if you're really trying to figure out if you're more of an introvert or an extrovert, maybe take on some gambles and see how your brain is reacting. See how you feel about taking all those gambles and if they paid off, or, it also comes down to the stimuli and the way that you react to things. And so it all comes down to the dopamine system and how each person kind of takes on that dopamine and how that affects them and how that affects the way that they live and the things that they do in their life. So there's so many factors that play in. But it is time for another break, but don't go anywhere, because when we get back, I'm going to just list off some very specific introvert versus extrovert traits. And then, of course, like I promised, we're going to jump into how to care for introverts versus extroverts. So that way, if you have a family member or a close friend or just anyone in your life that you run into and you need to take care of them, this could just give you a little bit of an insight of the best way to take care of an introvert versus an extrovert. So I got lots more to share to you, and I'm super excited to do so. So don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. Hello. We're on the last stretch of today's episode, and we're talking all about different personality types and traits. In particular, we're talking about introverts and extroverts, and if for some reason you're just tuning in now. But I mentioned a lot about kind of the difference between introverts versus extroverts, but I'm going to give you a direct list of qualities that an introvert might have compared to an extrovert. So introverts it's not just shy necessarily. It just means that if you're an introvert, you might get tired from being around people. So often you go for social situations or social interaction, or even just going to school or into work sometimes. If you are around a lot of people, it can really, really drain you. So you might go home and you might need a nap, or just take, your weekend off of not seeing anybody at all. Like, you just need your breaks from social interaction. If you're an introvert, you recharge on your own. More commonly, like, you just feel way better when you're by yourself and you have a lot more energy. Introverts usually think things through before they speak. So they like to just take things a little bit slower. They think it through. They're usually just not as abrupt or just like straight up sometimes. They like to actually think about what they're saying before they say it. So they enjoy their small, close friend groups, need that time alone to recharge, like I mentioned. They can also get upset or anxious or feel very overwhelmed when an unexpected change happens or like last minute surprises. Introverts don't usually like surprises very much. They don't like that last minute change. They like to know exactly what's going on, when it's going on, and if something throws them off, it can really throw them off. They may, just because they're shy or don't like social situations as much, or they don't recharge in social situations, it doesn't mean that they're going to avoid social situations either. You might find a lot of introverts that do like social situations. It just drains them more than an extrovert would. So it doesn't mean that they're avoiding those social interactions. It just means that it does make them a little bit more tired and they feel more energized or they recharge better when they're alone. So, they also prefer working alone. So an introvert might have a career where they get to do it more individual or maybe just like from their computer or something like that. Maybe a lot of introverts could work from home. Like that's kind of very comfortable for them instead of working in an environment that involves a lot of interaction or a lot of teamwork. Like I mentioned before, even the team exercise isn't as great for an introvert compared to an extrovert. So even like your workplace, if you're more of an introvert spectrum, you're going to be happier with a job that just requires you to do more things on your own instead of working as a team. Or if you're in school and you're more of an introvert, those team projects or those group projects might become a little bit more anxiety filled for you because you just don't like working in groups. Introverts actually also tend to zone out a lot and they're just kind of in their own world. They like being by themselves and in their own world. So you might see an introvert zoning out a lot. They feel more, they could be more sensitive. Like I said, their emotions might be a little bit higher. They might be a little bit more emotional than an extrovert is. And then they are usually known to be more self-aware and self-reflective. I think that comes with that high emotions and all that stuff that they deal with. But they are usually more self-aware than an extrovert is. So how exactly do we care for introverts? Well, the first thing that we do is we respect their need for privacy. This is huge. If you really understand that somebody is a true introvert, respect their privacy, respect their alone time. The next one is never embarrass them in public. They don't like being center of attention. They don't like that attention in general, that social interaction. So never embarrass an introvert in public. Number 3 is let them observe first in new situations. Give them time to ease in, observe the environment, see what's going on before you kind of just throw them into a situation. That can be very, very helpful. So let them observe and kind of feel everything out. Number 4 is give them time to think. So just don't demand instant answers from them. Like I said, they like to really think about what they want to say. They might reflect more. They might be more, trying to figure out some self-awareness. So don't, rush them. Don't demand any answers. Also, don't interrupt them because they can get very shy and anxious when somebody is over talking them. It's that social interaction again. So don't interrupt them. Give them their time to think, their time to observe. Give them advance notice of unexpected changes in their life as well, or expected changes. If you know that something is coming up, give them as much advance notice as you can, even just for stages in their life. If you're a parent and you're parenting an introvert, it might be beneficial to really try to give them a heads up of kind of what's to come, the stages in their life and how it's going to be. So it gives them time to reflect and observe it before it actually happens. That can be really, really helpful. Number 7 is give them 15-minute warnings to finish whatever that they are doing. They don't like to be rushed. They don't like to be put on the spot because that's that attention again. So give them some time to relax and give them some time to just be warned that, maybe time's up or whatever is coming next. Number 8 is reprimand them privately. Number 9, teach them new skills privately. They're shy, remember, or usually they are shy. They don't like to be put on the spot. So don't put them in front of a big crowd and try to teach them something in front of a large crowd. That will cause them a lot of anxiety. Number 10 is enable them to find one best friend who has a similar interest and abilities. Introverts will find that one best friend and hold on to that best friend for dear life. They're not that type that's going to have a huge group of friends, so let them find that one best friend and hold on to them. So number 11 is don't push them to make a lot of friends either. Let them have their friend, their best friend, or a couple, their small group, because they are happier with that than you think they are. And number 12, just respect the way that they are. Don't try to, remake them into extroverts. Of course, this goes both ways. You don't want to make somebody that they're not, but really just let them do their thing and try to understand them and give them that time to observe and to learn and to recharge by themselves. Now, let's go through some traits of an extrovert. So they enjoy social settings, like I mentioned. They energize by socializing. They thrive around people. They're usually the most energetic and happy self when they are around others. They're really outgoing and talkative. Like I said, they might run up to groups and start talking, give hugs, and just really appreciate those connections. Usually extroverts are friends with many people. Usually might have a big friend group or have multiple friend groups or just friends from all over kind of thing. They like to have their friends. They like to know people. A lot of people know them just because of outgoing and being talkative. Extroverts are usually very optimistic and they aren't afraid of risk. They like to go push out of that comfort zone and go get whatever they're going for. They also tend to think out loud. I am guilty of this one too. I would say I'm more of an extrovert compared to an introvert. I definitely have some introvert qualities of me, but this one for an extrovert, I also tend to think out loud. And extroverts also make quick decisions. They're usually just pretty okay, done, decision done, and they move on to the next thing or whatever's going on, compared to an introvert that might just take some time, and it's good to just give them time to kind of focus on whatever that they want to do, right? So how do we care for an extrovert? Well, the number one thing is just respect their independence. Don't try to control them. Don't try to bottle them down with anything. Just respect their independence. Number 2 is compliment them in the company of others. They really enjoy this attention. Extroverts like this attention. They like to be complimented in front of others. So give them compliments in front of others if you're so inclined to. Number 3 is accept and encourage their enthusiasm. Follow through with it. Be their friend that's yeah, let's go get it. Just accept it and encourage it, and don't let them feel like they are too much. Allow them to explore and talk things out. They're talkative. They want to talk things out. They want that social interaction. So let them explore different avenues and different things and talk things out loud. Number 5 is thoughtfully surprise them. This is huge. They like surprises. This is one thing as I think I'm mostly an extrovert. I love surprises, but I never get surprises. I'm always the one doing the surprises, and I think that's because I love them so much, so I want other people to be surprised. But this is such a huge thing. Extroverts love surprises, so surprise them. Number 6 is understand when they are busy. Extroverts usually have a lot going on. They're usually, in different social situations or just have a lot going on in their life, so respect that they're busy. Number 7 is let them dive right in. Let them just go do their thing. Let them, if they feel confident about it, they feel enthusiastic about them, let them do it. Number 8 is offer them options. Give them options to do different things because they like options. They like having different choices or different social, interactions to go to or different parties and all these things, right? So give them options if you can. Number 9 is make physical and verbal gestures of affection. They really enjoy those straight up affection that you can give them. Give them those verbal and physical gestures because it makes them feel good. And then number 10 is let them shine. Let them be enthusiastic. Let them run around. Let them be the spotlight if they want to be the spotlight. Just let them do their thing. And that goes for both. Let them do their thing, introverts and extroverts. We all usually lie a little bit somewhere in the middle. You might have heard some of these qualities that you find in yourself. You might have some of both, like I do. I definitely have qualities that are more introverted, and then I would say most of my qualities are extroverted, but there are definitely some very specific things that are introverted for me as well. So it all depends, and remember that we're always ever changing, so you're never one extreme to the next. You could be more of an introvert in certain situations compared to when you're an extrovert. it goes both ways. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button. I got new episodes out every single Monday and Thursday. Please do not forget to head over to our social media pages, like and follow those. And as always, leave a 5-star review. I look forward to sharing more with you next time. Thank you so much for being here again. Till next time, thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.